Okay, so we're going to start with number 5, and then we're going to finish with Dad's favorite of these 5. Well, number 5 is The Red Badge of Courage. The star was Audie Murphy.
He was an actual war hero, and someone got him into acting, and he just had this natural all-American boy way about him. In this one, ironically, he plays someone who is afraid, who wouldn't be. You know, he's out there as a boy, young man, in the middle of the Civil War.
Yeah.
And it's told through his thoughts, and that's what makes this. It's not a war movie. It's a personal movie, and it really, you can plug in what you're afraid of or what bothers you. Or he had to, what I really like about it, he would look around his tent or his camp and say, "I guess I'm the only one who feels this way."
Yeah, there's so many characters that were very relatable. Like there were the guys who would be the big talkers and tell all these stories and everything, and then there'd be the more quiet, reflective types.
Yeah.
And you know, of course, the main character is filled with self-doubt, whether he would actually be brave when the time came.
Yeah.
And it was very relatable just to see the mental process he was going through. And all his friends were so, I don't think I've seen any of those guys in other movies, maybe one or two.
Yeah.
But they're pretty obscure, but it made for kind of a one-of-a-kind movie, I think, because it's not just like plucking out these big stars and throwing them in there.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, Paul, about the characters. That's the best part of the movie. There's no one Hollywood star. It's a group of guys, very rural setting. It's very much not a typical war movie. It's you could talk about in your high school, oh, I'm the only one who feels this way, or in my family, I'm the only one who is like me. I'm kind of the oddball. It has such keen insight into human lives. It's so wise. The young author who wrote this, you know, he was very young, but he had a lot of insight.
Yeah.
He wrote this, I think, in the late 1800s, the actual book.
Yeah, and I don't get the idea this was a very high budget movie.
No.
It was kind of the opposite in a lot of ways to other movies I like a lot. Like we were watching recently How the West Was Won.
Yeah.
And that was like a big spectacle with these special cameras and everything has multiple camera angles and all that. But I think they both, in a way, are missing something. Like they're both strong in their own ways. Like The Red Badge of Courage,
right,
I think in a way is stronger and just like more developed characters, more heart maybe, just a little more, it feels a little more real. Where the other ones, it's almost like you could watch it on mute. It's just like beautiful scenery, just beautiful settings, and it's touching in other ways. But I agree with you, all the reasons you like A Red Badge of Courage.
Yes, and How the West Was Won was such I think they had 3 cameras all stitched together to make one wide picture. They had 4 directors. So it's sort of a bit disjointed in my opinion. So it's a really good movie. I think for years, maybe decades ago, I thought I was kind of maybe prejudiced against because that title sounded like a war movie. I don't particularly like just war movies, people shooting the daylights out of each other. But it's really a personal, it's a glimpse into every one of us.
Well, number 4, Dad, what do you have for that?
Well, again, the top 3 are pretty solid, but 4 and 5 I just kind of came up with on the fly. But I'd say The Spirit of St. Louis, made in 1957, stars Jimmy Stewart. He plays Charles Lindbergh, the first man to cross the Atlantic in a solo flight, uninterrupted flight. And I guess you couldn't really have an interrupted flight either because they didn't have fueling in the air at that time. He made it from New York to Paris in 1927. He was the toast of the entire world. It was a dazzling accomplishment. It's not about it's not all about that. It's about the human. This movie is about the human little steps that went into this flight. And Jimmy Stewart is so good with the everyman quality. And it shows him going to the airplane factory, checking, can we build a plane like this? He had to get sponsors. He didn't have the money to do this. And there were backers, people who were trying to back him. It was very dangerous. Other people had died trying to do this feat. So I won't give it all away, but it's just very compelling, it happened, so it's a biography. He's fantastic.
He's definitely my favorite actor.
Yeah.
Old and new. Of course, I like old movies. I know the old actor and actresses much more than the new ones anyway.
Right.
But even among those, Jimmy Stewart is definitely my favorite. Yeah. And actually, I think this has a lot of similarities to The Red Badge of Courage. Yeah. Because there's a lot of narration, you kind of hearing his thoughts. Yeah. Since a lot of the time is him in the plane. Right. Actually making the journey.
And they do make use of flashbacks.
Yeah.
To break that up, which I think is a very wise.
Oh yeah, that was
move.
Very smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, you're doing that with your movie project.
Right.
Dad's doing, some of you know, he's doing an independent movie project. We'll see where God leads it and who he wants to see it and everything. But Either way, it's fun. I mean, it's been so fun doing that. Dad uses, I don't think he minds me giving that away, that he uses flashbacks a lot in his storytelling.
Right.
So, but yeah, the Spirit of St. Louis is so good. It's just so he's so believable. Jimmy Stewart's so believable as a man of all different ages, because he'll do a flashback of him suddenly 20 or 30 years back, and it's believable. And then they're flashing to the present, and it's believable. When you said it was a long movie, that actually surprised me, because I never thought of it as a long film, which is probably a good sign if I wasn't bored by it.
Well, yeah, it's like, you know, when you like something, it doesn't matter if there are more potato chips to eat. Yeah. You know, it doesn't. I mean, it's a lot. 5 minutes of eating potato chips or apple pie or chocolate cake is a lot different than 5 minutes listening to somebody scrape a chalkboard. You know.
Yeah. Well, somebody had a line about that. I don't know if it was C.S. Lewis or somebody that said, or I think it was Einstein. I wish I could remember the quote exactly. It was something like, the theory of relativity. He explained. He said, well, it's the difference between like how long it feels to an hour feels talking to a pretty girl compared to 5 minutes doing your most unwelcome chore or something like that.
Yeah.
But where it's all
everything is relative. I found that some of my favorite things are very plain and direct and kind of real, because we all want something durable. We don't need to be endlessly entertained and distracted. Sooner or later, we need something that's real food, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and before I forget it, I wanted to tell you all, in case you haven't seen it, we just filmed an episode about the top 10 classic Christmas movies. We released that a few weeks ago. Yeah. Dad gave his top 10. We talked about them. Really popular episode, so check that out if you have a moment. And I tend to like the movies that leave me inspired or that are really interesting. But I guess probably inspiration is a big thing that I love about the movies. Like I've definitely experienced others over the years where it's the opposite, where you just felt like you just ate a bunch of cotton candy or something, and maybe you even feel guilty for watching it, and it just you didn't leave with anything. It was like eating cardboard or maybe poisonous cardboard or something. Yeah. In some cases. So I'm really just happy with the choices you guys made over the years.
Sure.
And the culture you set for these movies. All of us, you're always here talking about these old movies. So it's not just like you guys had a whip and said, hey, we're only watching these. Yeah. Like you would try to accommodate and let us watch newer movies that weren't destructive at times. Right. But in the end, we just gravitated toward these because they're so good. And not there aren't any good new ones, but just the high percentage of them we tend to like the old movies. And then when we watch something else, it's usually a documentary like History Channel or something like that.
Yeah, because after a while, I guess after you taste real food, plastic food doesn't taste too good, you know.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Well, I was just given a sneak preview of what this one is, and it's one of my favorites, The Quiet Man. From 1957?
52.
52. Oh, I was off by 5 years.
That's okay.
But what do you like about this film? I know I love so many things about it.
Well, it was filmed on location in Ireland. John Wayne, it's not a very typical, it was kind of before all the big cowboy movies. Well, he had done some prior to that. Mm-hmm. But it's a very unique story. It shows the countryside of Ireland, stone walls everywhere, the brogue, the Irish brogue, the small villages. It's just a beautiful movie, great story, a lot of fun too. Just a lot of fun with Maureen O'Hara, and just a lot of strong local characters.
This one is so good, and the scenery just feels like you went back in time 100 years in Ireland. I think it's such a good story, and there are so many great character actors like Ward Bond, who of course was the police officer on It's a Wonderful Life I guess that was 6 years before this was made. Yeah. And then Maureen O'Hara with her, fiery red hair and her temper on here, and John Wayne, of course, he's a little bit of a different character on here. Yeah. He's more of course, he's a former boxer, and he's an American in Ireland, not used to their culture. Right. And he runs into all sorts of things kind of unknowingly. Right. And there are so many other guys like I'm blanking on the Danaher, what's his name? Victor?
Oh yeah.
Or not Victor.
McLaughlin,
so him, and then the girl he's interested in. There's some really funny moments there. The widow that he's interested in. Yeah. And it's just it's such a great movie, such a good story. There's kind of a famous scene later on with John Wayne taking Maureen O'Hara on this long, long walk, and then this big fight scene too that we always watched as kids. That's what we look forward to even before we could appreciate the storyline.
It's a cliche, but they don't make them like this anymore.
Now we're on to number 2. That went quickly. Yeah. I don't even know what number 2 is. What is it, Dad?
Well, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers from 1954. One of the first movies probably that you guys as kids were able to watch in our home, because the idea of renting a movie had just come out. It was only possible. We were awed by the fact that you could go to your local store now and rent a VHS tape, pay a certain amount, have to have it back in 2 days or whatever, and you could show your kids these old classics. The Seven Brothers, they live alone. It's in Oregon territory. They live up in a rural mountainous area. They're cut off from town. Every once in a while, they go into town to buy supplies, and the movie opens musically with Adam, the oldest brother, singing and coming in to get supplies, a huge amount of chewing tobacco and this and that, and ready to head right back. And he says, and he asks the storekeeper, "You wouldn't happen to have any wives here?" And she kind of frowns, because they're just a bunch of kind of unkempt but very lovable brothers living way up there. And I don't want to give it all away, but basically they do meet 7 women, and it's a unique way of courting them.
This was always a special movie to the family, and especially to Mom, because she said that she heard about this movie long before she had a family at all, and she was always fascinated with the idea of 7 boys. And she said, "Oh, that's neat, but whoever heard of someone having 7 boys? That's impossible." Yeah. And little did she know she'd have almost double that. But as our family was growing, we would have, when we were really watching that a lot, there were about 6 or 7 of us. So I remember for a while I was Adam, the oldest. The oldest son is Adam. So it's okay, you're Paul, you're Adam, and then Benjamin's the next one. Okay, John, you're Benjamin. And we'd each have our own character, all the way down to Gideon, the 7th, who was our 7th, Philip. And so that's kind of how it worked, and it would constantly be changing then as new brothers came along.
Yeah, it definitely is up there as one of Mom's top 2 or 3. And it was actually filmed on a set. They had a tight budget. I once talked to Howard Keel, one of the co-stars, and he said that he didn't like the fact, he was really always bothered by the fact that it wasn't filmed on like our last movie, which was on location in Ireland. This was filmed on a set. It's still a fantastic, rollicking, joyful, colorful musical.
Now, wasn't this made the same year as Brigadoon,
or about that time?
Because I think they said all the budget went to that, or a lot of it did. And Seven Brides actually ended up being the bigger hit, even though we like Brigadoon also.
Right.
But it would have been nice if Seven Brides could have gotten that treatment too, just to see more of the beautiful mountains and setting that it was taking place in.
And it just fits back to another video that we had done about mental health. And this is such a happy movie. It's colorful. The 7 brothers have different colored shirts on. They're very physical. There are a lot of dance scenes. They're very athletic event type. And the barn raising scene. So people, it's basically...
And a good fight scene in there. Yeah, for the young boys in our family.
And I don't think the women would mind at all. There's a huge amount of romance and the awkwardness of these 7 brothers trying to relate to these women. They're so basic and simple and sincerely awkward,
I watched a Gene Kelly documentary recently, and they were talking about certain musicals get a pass by people who maybe don't usually like musicals. And I heard Singing in the Rain was an example of that. And I agree with that. That's kind of a good example of like a comedy and kind of a parody of the silent era and everything. I would put Seven Brides for Seven Brothers kind of in that category, where even if somebody's not real into musicals, this would be kind of a gateway drug, so to speak, into that world, because it's just an entertaining movie overall. Yeah. And it's very physical, a lot of very physical dancers.
Right.
Not overly sophisticated or flowery with 20-minute dance numbers or things like that. So I think it's really good.
It's very blue collar, very rural, very real, and yet people who consider themselves sophisticated would also appreciate the amazing choreography. The dialogue is so witty. Everything's so clever, rapidly moving.
Well, that was very quick. We're into number 1 already, and I'll let Dad introduce that.
Well, we watched this just the other night, the Christmas season. Ben-Hur, 1959. It's Mom's number 1 movie. I'd say it and It's a Wonderful Life are my 1-2 or 2-1, whatever you say. But we watched it the other night, and it delivered once again. It's a beautiful movie, and It's very lengthy, but it holds up well, you know.
Of course, it's so beautifully filmed and the music is so wonderful, but I think probably the thing that really carries it in my mind is the relationships that they show at the beginning.
Right.
With Judah Ben-Hur being kind of a wealthy, I guess they'd say like a prince of Hur, like maybe a leading citizen there.
Yeah.
Very prominent and loved and just a very benevolent and a good man. Yeah. And then his best friend growing up, Messala, has become a Roman pretty high up, I guess, a centurion or something, kind of rising quickly. And so he comes over for this reunion, and they just are, you know, just love each other. You could tell it reminds me of like David and Jonathan in the Bible. Yeah. But talking about the good old days, and they immediately have like a competition of who can throw a spear most accurately, and just reliving old times. Yeah. And the one sister of Judah Ben-Hur had a crush on Messala, and Messala treated the whole family so well. And then, without giving the whole thing away, things kind of go south pretty quickly, and the Roman occupation just affects them so much. And the rest of the movie is basically them trying to put the pieces back together. Yeah. And Ben-Hur dealing with a huge amount of bitterness, but a lot of tenacity too, just making it through all these different things that are thrown at him. It's kind of known for the epic chariot race scene, and I think you said that before you even knew about the movie. Yeah. That's what you associated with, was just kind of a sword and sandals movie, as you called it.
I don't particularly like the sword and sandal genre, and I don't particularly like battles. It's just endless. The chariot race, I knew that it was famous for the chariot race, but that's all within the story. Once you get to the chariot race, you really care about the two main characters who are in the chariot race. They could just as well be. It could be an American story, and they're on opposite teams in the World Series or something. You know what I mean? It's not a sword and sandals movie. It's a movie that's entertaining, very romantic, and very much amazingly beautiful toward the end. It involves Jesus and the cross, and leading up to the crucifixion, and what that does to bring healing and forgiveness to people. When I watched it, I actually was starting from below scratch, because when I had kind of a prejudice that, oh wow, chariot scene, sword and sandals, Ben-Hur, what's that mean? What does that mean? And Mom and I, when you guys were all sleeping once, and I think in the 80s, before there were any classics TV channels, or you couldn't rent, we just saw it come on like the late show or the early show, maybe from 2:00 a.m. to 6 a.m. And it ran for almost 4 hours, counting the commercials. I think in reality it's about 3.5 hours, but it basically kept our complete interest, and we couldn't wait until the next part of it, even with commercial breaks. And we were both kind of silent and kind of in awe when it was all over. And so it shows you how your prejudices, you should always hold those lightly, because you could be avoiding things that you would like. It's a really good movie, and it opens with the nativity, a really beautiful hushed kind of nativity scene over the Holy Land, and just the way it's done is so paced so beautifully, and such beautiful cinematography, and there's a lot of love that went into the making of this film.
Oh yeah, it's really incredible that it was made by a non-Christian. Yeah, if I understand right, was it?
I think the director made that comment.
Yeah, I forgot I'm drawing a blank on his name now.
Yeah, I don't want to quote him now. Yeah,
is it Weiler?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
And he made a comment that it's ironic that it took him to, a Jewish man to make the best Christian movie of all time.
Yeah.
And it's not only a Christian movie, you feel like you're in Israel too. It's just, no matter what your background, it's just a good movie. If it were set in an American city, and the two friends had kind of had a falling out, and one was kind of under the power of the other. It's just a good story in itself.
It really is very, very good. I can't disagree with that. I think Ben-Hur was probably my favorite movie of all time. Either that or It's a Wonderful Life. I'm at the same dilemma you are, number 1 and 2.
Yeah.
But as far as movies in the 50s, I think it's without a doubt the best. Well, I guess that's it. We could go on forever about these movies, and I'm sure there are many we missed. In fact, let us know in the comments if you guys have any favorites in the 1950s. We're going to do some more of these episodes.
Yeah.
Do you guys recommend anything? Like what top 5s, what top 10 categories should we do?
Yeah.
Should we do an actor? We thought about doing Jimmy Stewart or Ginger Rogers. Maybe we can do a different decade. Let us know.